We are so happy to be able to talk with you and let the viewers at CTV know, number one, that you're right here in Prince George's County honoring us with the wonderful work you're doing with the youth.
Oh, thank
Now,
you.
you're here at Bowie State University. There are so many questions that, of course, come to mind, but number one, what prompted you to want to work with, again, young people for the arts?
Well, you know, if we don't work with young people, there's no future. And you've got some really good writers here, but more, if I may, not exclusively, I'm not trying to make a broad statement. You've got some really great teachers. And whatever you're doing with your teachers, you know, you just ought to pat yourselves on the back because you've got some really energetic, really smart, really creative people. And that needs to be supported. I've been incredibly disappointed at the dissolution of the middle class, that when you look at America, you know, the middle class is just shrinking, 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 and we do know that the better way to build the middle class is through teachers and librarians. And I fail to understand why the Secretary of Education doesn't know what I know. And we need more teachers, we really do. And we need more teachers like the ones we're finding here.
In Prince George's County.
In Prince George's County, yes.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that. Now, when we think about Nikki Giovanni, those of us who are fans and those of us who have just followed poetry for many years, we think about your fiery activism, and we love it. There are some, however, that would say that poetry and politics should never meet. What would you say to those who are in the camp that believe the two should be separate and
That's
apart?
ridiculous. Of course, poetry and politics. I mean, we began poetry. And as poetry was birthed, it actually began to shape our politics. Poetry, I was laughing because I have a friend who's a mathematician, and mathematicians, you know, and engineers always think they know something. And I'm saying, you know, I'm your mother. Math came out of poetry. Poetry didn't come out of math. Where would we be without poetry? And so people want to push poetry aside because people understand poetry. So when the poets take up issues, they get heard.
Right.
And so a lot of people would say, well, that's not really poetry because poetry should be roses are red and violets are blue. I don't think so. Poetry should try and actually does change the world. That's what we're there to do. We're there to bring the issues up.
Okay, and when we talk about poetry and the history of poetry, what do you see as the future of poetry?
Oh, we're going to continue what we're doing. You know, Shakespeare said first we kill the lawyers and the poets. So we're going to continue to be a spur in somebody's, you know, saddle. We're going to continue to upset some things, but we're going to Mars. And one of the things that poetry is doing for us is emotionally and intellectually preparing us for the trip to Mars. We are going to Mars. That Mars is our sister planet. Mars is there, and somebody's got to go. And I think that the only way, I was talking to the kids about it, but the only way we can really talk about people, humans, making interplanetary travel is through Middle Passage. We have to study Middle Passage. And that's the one thing that America has to answer for and to deal with. Middle Passage is probably the most important of all of the periods in the history of this nation. Middle Passage is the most important because without the sanity and the good wishes of the Africans who were enslaved as they came here to America. They could have been crazy as a loon, but they came here and they brought a song with them and they brought a good spirit. And we have to figure out how that happened so that when we do make that trip to Mars, we are ready to whatever life forms are there, present ourselves to that life form in the way that they did.
Okay,
that makes sense?
That makes absolute sense.
Yeah, it's so important. So kids got to study. They have to know their history.
When you talk about poetry, one of my favorite poems of yours is Mother.
Oh, thank you.
And the role of poet and mother are significant in your life. Could you speak on that, please?
Not really. I mean, I am both, but poetry is my profession and motherhood is private.
Okay, okay. Well, with regard to a message for young persons considering poetry and aren't quite sure that that's their genre, what would you say?
I would say, whatever it is that you do, do the poetry. You know, Miles Davis once said to John Coltrane, whatever you play, play the blues. And he was absolutely right. Whatever you're doing, it's going to be a poetry of it. And that's what you want to find, is not that I do poems, but I do the poetry in my profession. I do the beauty, I do the forward thinking, I find that depth in it. And that's what you want to do.
Well, Ms. Giovanni, thank you. Nikki,
Nikki.
thank you so very much. You've been an inspiration to many. Is there one poet who would inspire you?
There are a lot of writers who inspire me, because my favorite writer on earth is, of course, Toni Morrison.
Okay.
And now you've got that wonderful Edwidge Daddickett, who is, I think, incredibly brilliant, and my own former student, I'm so proud of him, Kwame Alexander. Kwame is really coming up, and he's just really making all of us so proud. So there's a lot out there to be in love with.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.